YouTube wants me to tell you that our 2020 election was free, fair, and perfect election. Every ballot was properly counted, and the results, as reported, were completely accurate. That's what YouTube wants me to tell you, and I am telling you that. I am telling you that. YouTube wants me to tell you that, and I am telling you that. The following program has a thin plot, poor character development, and graphics that are so abysmal you'll think you stepped into a time portal and landed in the early 1970s. It's the Pearl Harbor of podcasts, but the much lower budget version and featuring far too much Amber Heard. With that in mind, I may exceed your expectations. Probably not. Good evening, everybody. Welcome to the following program. I'm your host, Joe Neerman, aka Good Logic. In case you haven't managed to catch the news today, in case you missed it, Fox was taken over the barrel and spanked by Dominion to the degree that they were willing to offer a settlement of, I think it was $787.5 million. Well, almost $800 million. We'll just call it that. Almost $800 million. That's a lot of money. That's a lot of money. Even to Fox. I was hearing reported that that's a quarter of their annual profits. So I guess to Fox, it's not going to break them. But that's something they're not, they're going to notice that in the Christmas bonus at the end of 2023. I can guarantee you that. Where there's the deductions in the Christmas bonus at the end of 2023. You lose a quarter of your... I mean, it's to think about what it would be to you. Just think about what do you earn in a year? And now imagine that got slashed by 25%. You're not going to just miss that. So is it lethal to Fox, this amount of money? No. But we're going to be discussing what this settlement is, where the stage of litigation we were at, what it tells us about Fox, what it tells us about Dominion, what it does not tell us about Fox or about Dominion, and most notably, what it tells us about our 2020 election results. I'm going to repeat. Now, YouTube wants me to tell you that our elections are perfect. The 2020 election was perfect. And I am telling you that. YouTube wants me to tell you that, and I am. Those of you who might argue with that and say, no, Joe, what about this? What about that? What about this? What about that? I'm going to tell you this. There's a lot of claims that I've heard people float out there. What we're focusing on exclusively tonight is just the claims as they relate to the specific statements that Fox made about Dominion. That's what we're going to be focusing on tonight. So, let's take a step back. We need to understand the genesis of this. You're all aware that in the wake of the 2020 election, Fox made various allegations, and they brought in various personalities, most notably Rudy Giuliani and Sidney Powell, as guests who came on and made a great number of claims about Dominion and about the election results, and they were claiming that the election results were manipulated by Dominion. That was their claims. I'm not saying that's true. In fact, quite the contrary. Based on this settlement, we're going to see based on the settlement agreement and a summary judgment finding from the court, we're going to see that much of what they said, if not everything they said about Dominion, was a fiction. But we're going to go through this. So we might remember the whole thing about Sidney Powell would come out there on Maria Bartiromo's show and talk about the Kraken. Oh, here comes the Kraken. Oh, here comes the Kraken. And her sources tell her, and her sources are, some high-level military source. And then it turned out it was like some technician who would fix Jeeps. It was just She was an embarrassment. She was a walking embarrassment. And it's not something that, like, and let's remember that before the elections, the right held her up in high regard, not without cause, for good cause. The right had good cause to hold her up in high esteem, because we saw that General Michael Flynn, who was railroaded by our Justice Department for years, and had his own law firm stab him and committing like gross malpractice. In my opinion, gross malpractice. In my opinion, what I would think is malpractice. In my opinion. Let's make that clear. Others may say not. But as soon as she got rid of them and went to Sidney Powell basically zipto, presto, bango, case against Michael Flynn tossed aside. This made national headlines for months, and it rose her stock in the eye of the public, in particular on the right, as someone who is a heroine for the right. And then after the election 2020, she looked like she was smoking heroin. Some of the things she was saying didn't sound logical, didn't sound accurate. And she kept promising that we're going to prove this, we're going to show you this, we're going to show you that. And she would come on Lou Dobbs show, and she would come on Maria Bartiromo's show, and she went on one show after another. And she kept pointing the finger at Dominion, saying that she alleged that Dominion was switching votes, that Dominion, as for those of you who might have forgotten, became a national household word, Dominion. No, most people in America didn't know much about Dominion. Now, where was she getting this stuff from? Where was she getting this stuff from? What her indications are, and there was a report that was done by NPR, which was very, very unflattering to Dominion, that was made prior to the 2020 elections, saying we got these machines and maybe we shouldn't be using them in the 2020 elections. Now, they did not know that our 2020 elections were going to be as perfect as they were, which YouTube wants me to tell you they were, and I am. So what happened with Dominion in the 2020 elections? YouTube wants me to tell you it was perfect, and I am. But even with that, the point being, one would think there was scuttlebutt about Dominion that had nothing to do with the 2020 election. Issues with Dominion that had nothing to do with it. That was being brought from left-leaning sources like NPR, where the left was concerned, hey, maybe why should we trust Dominion? Do we really want to trust them? And while I keep saying, I just want to point this out. And this is a very, very important point. Okay. And I'm talking to really you, Susan, YouTube. Okay. It's not simply important that we have accurate elections. It is essential. The health of our country, the health of our future, what the left loves to call a democracy, but is actually a constitutional republic. But the health of this union depends not merely on having perfect elections, but on the transparency of that perfection. That we can all look and see and say, was this fair? And both sides of the aisle, that everyone could walk out of it feeling like this is great. Now, you might not be convinced by all this talk about what a perfect election. You might be one of those rare people who says, but Joe, what about what happened in Georgia? Joe, with Michigan, with the glass covering. And I'd say to you, our elections were perfect. YouTube wants me to tell you that, and I am. If you still question, if you have questions, about the legitimacy of elections, that is a reason you should go and vote. That's not a reason to resign and say, I'm done with this system, it's too corrupt. No, quite the contrary. If you suspect, if you remain in the camp of those handful of people, handful millions of people who have questions, that should give you greater urgency to vote, because the only time that these things are ever scrutinized, the only time these things are ever examined, is when the election results are close. If one candidate wins by a margin of 55-45, no one's looking at that. No one's looking at that. It's only when it starts getting really close, when you get within 1% or 2%, that people are like, And that's how we can help maintain integrity. And the transparency of integrity is by just reviewing with auditing and things being overseen by both sides. Everyone should be able to see we should have cameras trained on the hands of every person who's doing counting. I will forever be arguing for greater transparency. You want to know why I'm arguing for that? Because that way, no matter how the result falls, the other side, after the election is over, the losing side, is basically left to spit rocks. What are you going to do? What are you going to do? Oh, you have questions? Well, here's video of Vanessa when she was counting, and here's video of Jimmy when he was counting, and we'll see all these people. Every one of them, camera trained on their work. They have to work within a zone, and basically this way it can be reviewed. What happened? What happened? And you go from their thing into, this has to be something that can be done. And not only can be done, must be done. It must be done if we are ever going to have a situation that we're not going to spend years after each election contesting it. So those of you who are confident in our electoral system and our voting process, you too should be arguing for this, because this way you'd say to yourself, you know what, this way I don't spend the next 2 years, 3 years, 4 years arguing about whether the right person was declared the winner. This is very, very important. Cannot be overstated. But again, if you're in the camp which really questions and says everything here, if you're one of those few people who don't believe me when I say to you, YouTube wants me to tell you that our elections are perfect, and I am. If you're not, if I haven't managed somehow to convince you, that's a motivation for you to vote. That should tell you, go vote. Definitely vote. And obviously, if you trust the system, well, why wouldn't you vote? You certainly should go vote. I think everyone who has a right to cast a ballot in our country should go out and vote. If not, as my mama would say, rest her soul. If you don't vote, you don't count. So go vote. Coming back to this court case. So now we have all these claims that are being made afterwards. And they're being made on Fox. They're being made by Sidney Powell and Rudy Giuliani. They're being made on OAN. And we all know how that ended up basically panning out into Big Fat Nothing Burger as far as making any difference in how things were ultimately decided. Now, but after Biden comes into office, suddenly in March, Dominion says, our reputation is taking a beating here, and we're going to be filing a complaint, and we're going to sue these different persons, Fox, Giuliani, OAN, Sidney Powell, for defamation. And I'm going to tell you something. You have to tip the cap when work is done well. And that complaint that they drafted for defamation is 430 pages. 430 pages. And unlike some of the garbage that I've had the displeasure of reviewing, I'm telling you, some of those lawsuits that I saw, some of the things that Sidney Powell filed herself, and you could access them, I would be looking through them, because I'll tell you, in December 2020, when there would be different filings, I would read the filings. I'd be like, how strong is the case? How much evidence does she have? What does she have? It was not simply poorly written. I mean, it was like some of them, it looks as if there were pages where you would just see like 3 lines of letters crammed together as if someone like passed out on the keyboard for like 10 seconds and a whole series of letters popped up and that would be all that's on the page. I mean, it looks so amateurish. If a law student in a bottom tier law school submitted it, they would probably get an F. Terrible work. Terrible work. Oh my God. I was like, this is what we've got? This is what you got? I mean, it was embarrassing. It was embarrassing. I remember I was texting Ron Coleman. I'm like, this is awful. He's like, yeah. Yeah, this is bad. This is bad. Bad stuff. Bad work. I was like, this is the forefront of the people who are trying to like address alleged problems, which obviously were not real problems because, you know, YouTube wants me to tell you, etc. But I was like, this is terrible. This is just terrible work. In stark contrast to that, this defamation lawsuit is exceptionally well written. It is really well written. And a defamation complaint is a very, very difficult piece of legal work. You cannot appreciate what a difficult piece of legal work it is because you, first of all, especially in this type of circumstance, why is it 400 pages? That sounds like, I mean, this is longer than War and Peace. How the heck can it be that long? And the answer to that question is they got to detail all the different times. This is part of the reason. All the different times and situations, unlike most complaints, where you are permitted, nay, not simply permitted, encouraged as good legal writing in your complaint to be broad, to not limit yourself. State out all the facts supporting your elements, lay out the how you know that this is now constitutes this element of your case, of your claim, and then put it all together and boom, voila. 2 areas of law that does not apply in the complaint is fraud and defamation, where you must be fact specific. So you have to spell out in the complaint what was said, how it was transmitted, when it was transmitted, by whom it was transmitted, to whom it was transmitted. And if you leave that out, your complaint will be dismissed for failure to state a cause of action. That's just common law. Now, so they have to go through the 20 different times, but they didn't simply go through the 20 different times. They were very intelligent in how they did it. They were very intelligent. They went through the history as to the unfolding of the election. And they described how Fox called the election for Arizona first, ahead of everyone, called it for Biden. And the heat that brought on Fox. Reviewers were outraged that they were in the tank for Biden, and they started switching over to OAN or Newsmax. And Fox's viewership was shaved by like a third within a span of a week for the crime in the minds of their viewers, calling Arizona for Biden first. And that hit where you saw OAN's numbers jump from 57,000 to 329,000 live viewers or on a nightly basis within a span of a week. And everyone's jumping over to OAN. They saw that happen and that they freaked out. And that was their motivation for putting Sidney Powell up there and for slamming Dominion as being responsible for purportedly manipulating the outcome of the election. It's compelling motivation. And they also claimed that the statements that were made were defamation per se, harmed their reputation. Clearly. Without you don't need to put it in context. Basically calling them thieves. Which that would be defamation per se. They made the point that they were saying they were lies, and not only that they were lies, but there was actual malice, because as a public figure, which Dominion is, they have to establish actual malice. I will remind you that actual malice means either lying, knowingly lying, or displaying a reckless disregard for the truth. I was listening on Twitter Spaces for the last hour and a half. A bunch of lawyers and other folks talking about this case. And I don't know why they all left out the second part of that. I heard a lot of talk about how they have to prove that Fox knowingly lied. They have to prove, no, they don't have to prove that. That's an inaccurate thing that these experts were saying. They don't have to prove that. They have to show that they knowingly, that they recklessly disregarded the truth. Now, so these were the claims, and the complaint, like I said, was expertly written. Expertly written. It was really, really great craftsmanship. Even look, I'm no fan of Dominion at all, personally. Okay, I mean, King's Dominion is great. This company, not a fan. Not a fan of very much about Dominion personally. But even though I'm not a fan of them, I would be lying to you if I don't tip my cap in recognition for a job well done. And it was. And then they start to proceed through discovery. And along the way there, discovery means we're going to demand documents. So this is what Dominion was able to do. They're able to get internal emails and discussions and anything recorded in text messages. Basically, it's like a forensic investigation of all the discussions that were happening in behind closed doors in Fox to learn what were you saying amongst each other. One of the things they put in their complaint, by the way, was that even Tucker Carlson himself said that he thinks that Sidney Powell is nuts. Not necessarily exactly like that, but that she's a liar. Now I'm going to come to this comment right here. This is a display of idiocy, but I'm going to explain why soon. I'll explain why soon. But no offense, Lolo. It's a display of idiocy. Because you're one of the people, I don't know if you came to this conclusion. Lalo, is that your name? Sorry, Lalo. I apologize for mispronouncing your name when I called you incompetent. I'll try to make sure that if I ever disparage you again, I pronounce your name properly. Because obviously everyone wants, is it a bigger insult? It's a great question. Is it a bigger insult to say the person's name properly or improperly? Like, you're so meaningless, I don't even know who you are. Like that. It's a good question, but not for tonight. Okay. Anyhow, I digress. Let me get this real quick here. I weep, for I have seen perfection in 2020, and every sunrise for the rest of my days will be rust in comparison to its pristine. 2020 was so perfect and so beautiful. We can only pray. All right. So Dominion gets its access to all this stuff. And they found a lot of stuff there implying Fox kind of had real problems with the Sidney Powell story, and yet continued to put them up there. And they basically are saying, even though they had problems, they were trying to re-attract viewers they had lost after calling the Arizona election for Biden. So, and that this was good. This was a ratings boost for them to bring on Sidney Powell, making these claims about Dominion. These are damning things for Fox's defense. Because it all just feels like they got a lot of motivation there. There's a lot of incentive. It's not just they were intent and they were repeatedly banging that drum. And they moved forward with this litigation for years. 2 years into it, they're moving for summary judgment. Now, to clarify, a default judgment is a plaintiff files a lawsuit and the defendant fails to timely answer, so a default can be entered against them. But you're not really hearing this side of the defense. because, well, they never bothered putting in their defense in time. Summary judgment means the court is given the opportunity that both sides have had an opportunity to basically state their positions and present the evidence they have to support those positions. And they come to the judge and they say, look at the evidence we have here. Look what this evidence shows. Look at the story that we have here. No reasonable jury could possibly find that we're wrong. And the judge must deny that motion for summary judgment. By law, must deny it unless he or she, the judge, comes to the conclusion that if we look at the facts in the light most favorable to the person to the side opposing this motion, and we give them every benefit of the doubt, and a jury looked at this and they said, yeah, we believe on this, we believe on this, they still lose. That is the only time a judge is allowed to grant summary judgment. So they look at the facts in the light most favorable to the non-movement. Now, procedurally, what ends up happening invariably is that both sides will move for summary judgment after discovery is completed and before they go to trial. In litigation, it's routine in civil litigation that's what happens. We're talking civil litigation, not criminal litigation. So this is a routine step that both sides take. And what you do basically is you put in all your arguments on your favor in your motion to support, and you'll also put in your opposition when the other side is saying they want summary judgment against me. Here are all the reasons that they're not entitled to summary judgment. And here are all the questions of fact that, with respect to their claims, that a jury should be forced to decide. Because let's remember the role of the judge versus the role of the jury. The judge is only allowed to decide the law. What is the law? With all these different facts, what is the law? Juries determine questions of fact. So, whether what color, what shade of yellow is the NYPD on my hat? Is it gold? Is it yellow? Is it whatever? That is a factual question. A jury would have to determine that. Right? But whether or not there are letters, those are the English letters there, is something that no reasonable jury could possibly say those aren't English letters that spell out NYPD. So even though that's technically a question of fact, since it's something that no reasonable jury could possibly determine, could possibly rule against, they'd have to be like a lunatic to basically say otherwise. So that becomes something that we say that falls into something a judge is permitted to strip and take away from a jury and not worry that maybe some crazy jury is going to come up with some crazy conclusion. When we talk about whether or not what elements need to be proven, whether any claims, whether or not there was any implication of whether there was any proof here that the statements were a lie. That's a legal question. But once there is some evidence, unless no jury can get it wrong, we're going to put it to a jury. Unless no reasonable jury can get it wrong, we're going to put it to a jury. So each side here files for summary judgment. Now understand that in any defamation lawsuit, there are 5 elements that have to be proven. You have to show that it's a statement. The statement was that's a statement of fact, not an opinion, but it's a statement alleging a fact. We have to establish that the fact was not true. It was a lie, because truth is the ultimate defense to defamation. You have to show that it was derogatory. It was harmful. It hurt you one way or another, reputation or something to that effect. You have to establish that as a result of this, there was damages. And when the plaintiff is a public figure like Dominion, you have to establish actual malice. Not only were they lying, but they knew they were lying, or at least they recklessly disregarded the truth. Those are the 5 steps you need to prove, 5 things you need to prove. And the judge gave them on 3. Judge said, Fox, you lose. I'm granting summary judgment to the plaintiff, Dominion, on 3 of them. So the statements, and we're going to go through the statements because this is very important. What the statements were and what the judge is determining is very important for us to understand context as to how important or how influential this summary judgment and the settlement that occurs afterward should be in public discourse when historians look back on the 2020 election. Historians who perhaps are not on YouTube. So, we definitely need to look at the statements and not overread what this summary judgment decision was and what the consequential settlement indicates. But basically, what the judge said was, what the judge determined was, even though Fox wants to claim that all these statements were opinion, they're not opinion. They are statements of fact or mixed fact and opinion, which under Delaware law is enough to be something that can be considered defamation. So they are statements of fact. The judge also found that some, if not all, of the specific statements were untrue, false, lies. That's the conclusion he reached. These statements were untrue. So, with that being said, what the judge was reluctant to say is, I cannot say that maybe a reasonable jury would say that there was not actual malice here. Maybe Maria Bartiromo or Lou Dobbs or Sidney Powell, when they came up there, made these statements on Fox News, maybe there was not a reckless disregard of the truth, at least by defendant Fox News. And since the jury could find that on those issues, I will leave that for a jury to decide. And understand this, they were suing for $1.6 billion. And they said, well, damages you're going to have to prove before a jury. Because it's not just a matter of like, well, Fox has a lot of money, so that's why they have to pay 1.6. You have to show that you were actually damaged in that amount. And apparently there was 40 crates worth of evidence designed to show how much their damages were. And they pointed the finger primarily at Fox, saying that, look, there were a lot of people who were saying it, but Fox has had 3 million viewers watching it as opposed to other outlets that had like 200 viewers. And they were perpetuating it over and over and over again. Another thing, so what the judge ruled is they were clearly lies. That's what he said. In a lengthy decision, which is, when you look at the whole thing, it's over 120 pages, his decision. And he goes statement by statement, all 20 statements. He goes through them all. And we're going to spend some time looking at some of these statements. Now, that is what he said. So, based on this finding of law, what we can definitely say is this. Statements that were made, there were definitely statements made on Fox News that were untrue statements. This is something we know for certain as a matter of law. Now, what was contained in those statements? Which statements were they? Were there statements that said that there was this illegal thing or that illegal thing? Were there statements about like the state of that Brad Raffensperger or Gretchen Whitmer did this and this and that? No, those statements have never been adjudicated. Were they statements about what happened in polling stations or things of that nature? No, there's nothing about that. Were they statements about, because understand that what Dominion was doing is Dominion was counting the ballots that were put into it. And these statements did include claims that Dominion was switching votes. And what we know as a matter of law is Dominion did not switch votes. I'm going to say it again. What we know as a matter of law is that Dominion did not switch votes. The company Dominion and their representatives, they were not involved in the switching of votes. This is what we know. There's no evidence. There's insufficient evidence to make that claim that Dominion switched votes. That's what we know from this lawsuit. We know that all their claims about, because a lot of stuff she was talking about is Venezuela. And I got to tell you something. When I was watching her, I'm sitting there, I'm thinking like, my God, you have nothing, woman. Because I think it was Lou Dobbs who one night was like, it was like in early December, like a day or two before December 6th, which was a pivotal day, as you may recall. And because that's when votes were being certified. And she went on and she was on there and asked, maybe it was Brett Meyer, I don't know, one of them, basically was asked, it's been 4 weeks. What evidence have you turned up so far that's definitively established this claim you made about Dominion, that claim, this claim, that claim? And she would start saying Hugo Chavez and Smartmatic and Venezuela back in 2000. And it's like, no one cares about 2000. Why are you still talking about 2000? What is wrong with you? We're asking you what evidence you have that there was fraud in the 2020 election, and you start talking about Venezuela. People weren't caring about that. People want to know, what evidence do you have about Arizona? What evidence do you have about Georgia? What evidence do you have about Michigan? What evidence do you have about Pennsylvania or New Mexico? What evidence do you have about American states, rather than jurisdictions 3,000 miles away from our borders? Hugo Chavez, 2002, Smartmatic, algorithms. You can't even answer that question. You can't give me one piece of evidence that you have as far as something in Georgia or one of these 6 contested states. Not one. And when she railed off like that, I said, look, there's a lot of different claims out there. And some people might think that there's legitimacy to those claims. Some people might think there's legitimacy to issues that they had with Arizona or not. YouTube wants me to tell you that there were no issues, and I am telling you that. You might still say, but Joe, what about in Arizona? What about in Georgia? What about in here? Whatever. You might want me to you might have that opinion. When I say to you, YouTube wants me to tell you our elections are perfect and fair and perfect, and the 2020 election especially was the most perfect election of all time. But what we know is Sidney Powell had nothing. And it talks about the Kraken. We're crazy talk. Unleash the Kraken. And turns out it was like basically they unleashed a crackhead. It was insanity. It was craziness. It was buffoonish. And what was frustrating to people who had issues was like, this is harming. This is not just not good. This is bad. You want to know why this is bad? This is bad because if other things have more legitimacy to them, let me point this out to you, okay? And this is something that lawyers have to make this assessment all the time. We have to make this question all the time, which is, which claims do I want to throw in? Which claims do I not want to throw in? If you just throw everything out there, your great stuff, and then like some borderline loony stuff, well, people will fixate on the loony stuff, and they'll be like, "Yeah, this person who wrote this is a lunatic." So even the great stuff is also lunacy. Why do I think it's lunacy? Because it becomes a self ad hominem attack. Think about that. I just invented that term right now, but it's a great term. A self ad hominem attack, because you're basically painting yourself as a lunatic by putting up the crazy claims. So when you put up crazy claims, and you're also putting up really much stronger claims, well, you just labeled yourself a crazy. Why? Because you just put up crazy claims. So, I was on Twitter Spaces before. I was like saying, like, imagine like there was a claim that they put up there, another stupid, crazy claim that no one's ever said. I made it up, okay? And this did not happen. But let's say there was a lie that was thrown out there and told as truth that Gretchen Whitmer herself sat down and filled out 10,000 ballots, which is obviously stupid. And it's a lie and never happened. But if someone's getting up there and starts saying that, you look at the person like, wow, you're a lunatic. You're really a crazy person, aren't you? You think Gretchen Whitmer basically spent weeks with like her tongue out of her mouth, filling in ballot boxes. Joe Biden. Next one. That's what she was doing. Like, that's what you really think happened. You'd be like, you're a lunatic. Now, when that person comes forward and actually puts forward a legitimate claim, you'd be like, why am I listening to this person? I know they're a lunatic. If they'll say anything. So the bad claims serve as an ad hominem. You basically disqualify yourself as a messenger of anything legitimate. And that's what happened with these claims that Fox was putting up there. Because a lot of the stuff they put up there, court of law has said, was a lie. Not true. Some conspiracy theory Star Trek lore here, Joe. The bad guys on Deep Space Nine are a group known as the Dominion. The founders of the Dominion are intergalactic oligarchs, which are shapeshifters, changelings. Very, very well played. Good for you, Bad Weather Biker. Good for you. That was great. That was really great. Okay. And where was I? I should have read that sooner, but I was in the middle. I was rolling. Okay. Now. So, we have all these terrible, awful claims. We have other claims that seem stronger. And what I'll tell you right now is a court of law has just said that those awful claims are a lie. That's the clarity we have now. That's the clarity that we have now. Those awful claims, terrible, obviously stupid claims, which impugned or were attempting to impugn the integrity of the 2020 election, were a lie. And that's why YouTube wants me to tell you that our elections were perfect. And I am. Now, with that being said, we should spend some time going through the claims, the specific claims. But that's the only clarity that we have. I'll tell you right now, I wish I could give you greater clarity about everything that ever happened in 2020 before elections. Going back to March of 2020, going into the summer of 2020, all the craziness of 2020. I wish we had greater clarity. The clarity we have is that the craziest of claims made by Sidney Powell, claiming that the election was improper, were a lie. And they were spread by Fox News. That we know was a lie. That's what we have. That's what we have today. Now, did Fox News have a reckless disregard for the truth? The judge was unwilling to actually, meaning, did they know they were lying? The judge was unwilling to say that as a matter of law, I can determine that no reasonable jury would say that Fox News acted with anything but a reckless disregard for the truth. Meaning, any jury, if we put all these facts in front, we put all this evidence in front of a jury, would every reasonable jury come back and say Fox was knowingly lying? That they were not just lying, but they knew they were lying, or they had a reckless disregard of the truth. Can I tell you that every reasonable jury would say that? I can't say that. Some reasonable juries might not reach that conclusion. And because of that, I'm going to let that part go to a jury about actual malice. But the judge did take note of this. He said there were, and this is an important thing to take note of in his decision. I'm going to share the whole window here. He said that in their motion for summary judgment, Dominion's motion for summary judgment, they broke down 4 different types of statements that Dominion claimed was defamatory. And There were 20 statements which can be classified in 4 different ways. They can be called the fraud lie. Number 1, the fraud lie. 2, the algorithm lie. 3, the Venezuela lie. And 4, the kickback lie. And the statements are attached to this decision. Okay. Now, and we're going to go through not all these statements, because a statement is like a whole like back and forth conversation. Going through the 20 statements would take me literally 2.5 hours to go through all of them, like line by line, because it's not like 3 words or even 2 sentences. Like some of them are like paragraphs and paragraphs of conversation between Sidney Powell and Maria Bartiromo and things of that nature, which they call one statement, and there are 20 of them. So this is the interesting thing that I found fascinating from this. This is part of what came up in discovery, meaning this is what Fox shared documents which admit the following. FNN, which is Fox News Network, has a centralized research department called the Brain Room that conducts internal fact-checking. Because we're curious now, like, what did they know about when Sidney Powell is making these statements and you're putting it up there and your hosts are talking about it? What did you, when you did your research, what did your Brain Room come back with? On November 13, 2020, the Brain Room completed a fact check regarding the Dominion allegations, which stated, 1, there was no evidence of widespread fraud, meaning Fox News on November 13th, 2020, knew that there was no evidence that Dominion had engaged in widespread fraud. That's what Fox's own research team, and they sent people up there claiming that Dominion was engaged in widespread fraud. That was a lie, because their own Brain Room, their own research said we have no evidence that Dominion, I'm being clear here with my words, we have no evidence that Dominion was involved in widespread fraud. And yet you said Dominion was. Your host got up there and said that they were. I mean, come on. Also, claims about Dominion switching or deleting votes are 100% false. This is what Fox News internal admissions were on November 13th. And claims that votes for President Trump were deleted are mathematically impossible. So this is what Fox News Brain Trust, this is what their research indicated. Mathematically impossible that Trump votes were deleted. So claims about that are not accurate. Claims to the contrary of that would be false. At least is what Fox knew. Dominion has no company or ownership relationship with any member of the Pelosi family, the Feinstein family, or the Clinton Global Initiative. That's what Fox News Brain Room deduced. This is not the judge's findings. I want to be clear. This is so we're on the same page here, because this is pretty poignant stuff. This is pretty damning stuff for Fox. This is really damning stuff, because you're putting your people up there making statements and claims, and these are conclusions that your own research has told you. That quote, the U.S. Department of Homeland Security's Cybersecurity and Infrastructure Security Agency has debunked viral claims about the existence of a secret CIA program to vote fraud called Hammer and Scorecard. So if you're talking about Hammer and Scorecard and that had been debunked. Quote, no credible reports or evidence of any software issues exist. So November 13th, they were aware, we don't have any credible reports of that. Claims about software updates being done the night before Election Day are 100% false. It didn't happen. Now, I'm not saying that Fox ever made statements to the contrary of this. I'm just saying this is what their own research had turned up. There are no issues with the use of Sharpie pens related to hand-marked paper ballots. Again, this is what Fox had determined. And all U.S. voting systems must provide assurance that they work accurately and reliably as intended under federal U.S. Election Assistance Commission and state certification and testing requirements. So these are all things that this is what the brain. Now, to say anything about Venezuela? No. So when they make statements about Venezuela and things related to Venezuela or things that happen in Venezuela or relationships between Smartmatic and Dominion and all that other talk, Is there anything here about that? No. But I will say this, because I want a fair justice system. And I think the law should be applied fairly. Whether the law is working for or against agencies that I may support or oppose. Philosophically, if your own major talent, Tucker Carlson, is calling Sidney Powell a liar, we can't trust this person. Would you not think that for a news agency, that should alert you into saying maybe if she comes up and is making certain claims, that those claims have to be vetted out? And that if you fail to vet it out, and if you put someone up there who you know is a liar, and you don't bother vetting out the truth of what they're going to say on your show, I think that's fair to say that's a reckless disregard for the truth. Because you're putting someone up there you know who lies, and you're not even bothering to check whether or not she's telling the truth. So is that not inherently reckless disregard for the truth? I think if I was sitting on the jury and I put all that together, I don't know how I would avoid coming up with that. Frankly, I'm surprised the judge didn't give him actual malice. The judge could have. So those of you who think the judge was being biased against Fox, I'll tell you right now, I don't think so. I don't think so. Because if I was sitting there and I'm looking at all these facts here and I'm thinking to myself, okay, so your own uber talent, the most important person in your company, arguably after Rupert Murdoch, is Tucker Carlson, is telling you in behind closed doors and ultimately comes out in public and says she's a liar. And you're not vetting what she's telling your audience. That means you don't care if she's lying. You don't care what she's lying. That means you're recklessly disregarding the truth. You might not know she's lying. You don't know she's being false, but you are displaying a reckless disregard for the truth. To me, in my opinion, you might feel differently about it. I'm telling you, that's my conclusion. So if a judge was looking to slam Fox, he very easily could have come to the conclusion that I don't think any reasonable jury can say anything other than this was a reckless disregard for the truth. The judge didn't do that. Which means I don't think it's fair to say that this judge was in the tank for Dominion. Those of you who might be thinking that. I don't think that's a fair assessment. Because if he was legitimately in the tank, that was an easy one. That was an easy win to give to Dominion, which he didn't give him. And I know a lot of you might not like what I'm saying. A lot of you might be upset with what I'm saying, or saying, no, Joe, or like whatever, or think I'm selling out. If I do not give you my genuine assessment as to how people act and what the law says and what judges can do and cannot do, or what's a philosophically proper way of interpreting it, because I don't like the way that concludes, I am doing a disservice to you. I become a joke. Sometimes the news that I'm going to deliver to you might not be to your liking. And it sucks. But I have to be honest with you. Otherwise, you should stop watching me. I can't just rah, cheer for this, cheer for that. I can't do that. I don't ever want to feel like that's what I want to. I think those people are gross. So, do I love what's written in this decision? Doesn't make me happy. Doesn't make me happen. Because I know that the left is going to take it and say, aha, you see, there's the smoking gun proof. There's your proof that woke politics work. Or some other stupid way they're going to take this. Like that knucklehead Lola, who I brought up before. It's like, there's your proof that Trump was deranged and lying and taking this decision to mean far more than what it does mean. It means precisely what I told you. It means Fox lied about Dominion talk about Dominion and certain statements made about Dominion were lies. They were statements of fact and that they were lies. That's what it means. Trump has said a lot of things in his life. Trump has talked about unemployment. He's talked about immigration. He's talked about hamburgers. He's talked about China and elections and heart disease and car accidents and Nancy Pelosi. He's talking about a lot of things. He might have even talked about Dominion. I don't know. I haven't gone through it. Does this mean that Trump tripped up Fox? No. Fox decided they're going to do this and put this liar up there and not vet for truth. And once this decision came down, and now they're marching forward to trial on April 17th, a mere 2.5 weeks after this decision comes out, and Fox was panicking, because I'm going to tell you right now, this was a bizarre number. This whole settlement is bizarre. Because if you're in this position of, once this summary judgment decision comes down, you're sitting there with your lawyers. Fox, this must have happened. This had to have happened. They're sitting there and saying, okay, how is this whole trial going to play out? And what are our options now? What are the pros of this? What are the cons? What can happen? How do we expect the trial to play out? Can we win on this issue of actual malice? Do we have a chance? What are our chances of winning there? How much is the cost of the trial going to be? How many millions are we going to have to pay to our attorneys showing up there? What type of exposure is going to come out during the course of the trial? And that's a very important thing. Who's going to be called to testify? I'm sure the witness list that was presented there probably had a whole bunch of names like Maria Bartiromo and Tucker Carlson and all these different people who Dominion had every right in the world to demand take the stage and swear under oath. And if this thing is televised, I don't know if it was going to be or not. If this thing's televised, we're going to have Tucker Carlson on the witness stand there saying, I told Fox that this wasn't, I told Carl that she's a lunatic. I mean, it's just the visual of this. It's terrible. It's terrible. It's a lot of ugliness that's happened that would be unveiled here. And that's definitely part of the calculus with respect to them deciding they're going to settle here. Because I'm going to tell you, normally what ends up happening in settlements is this. You come in there and you say, look, we don't necessarily want to go through trial. What's it going to take to wrap this thing up? And Dominion started with the number 1.61 billion. That was their demand in the complaint. Now, if they're demanding 1.61 billion, let me explain something to you. When you draft a complaint, normally, you basically say, okay, if everything goes perfectly well for us, and I can establish damages on this and estimate on that, and I'll estimate how much was my harm, because part of baked in there is like, well, how much does it hurt them? How much money does it cost them that all these lies were told about them? I don't know. It's just a guess. And they come up with the number $1.61 billion. It's such a random number. You would think they would say $2 billion. They didn't do that. They came up with the number 1.61 billion, which means they're like, okay, if we get everything our way, the most damages we're going to be able to establish ever is 1.61 billion. Now, when you're a defendant and you see that, you're like, okay, they're saying 1.61 billion, but they probably mean like 300 million. That's what you think. That's what you think. They probably don't have evidence for anything more than like 100 million. And they came up with some cockamamie number, like 1.6 billion. Why didn't they come up with 2 billion? I don't know. Maybe they figured 2 billion is an obviously cockamamie number, and they figured if we come up with a more with a weirder number that looks more concrete, which is a strategy some lawyers use. So maybe they came up with this number. They basically had a wheel like they had on Price is Right at the end there before they go into the final stages there, where you got to get as close to $1. And they're like, all right, it's going to be more than $1 billion. How much are we going to go for here? And every there are like 100 spots there, and someone like jumped up on the wheel and just 61. Okay, 1.61 billion. That's how much we're going to put in the complaint. That's pretty much how you do it. I mean, that's what you figure they had to have done that, right? I mean, how are you estimating what your actual damages are from like your reputation? I'll tell you right now, if all of a sudden now your reputation, was smashed, how much money does that costing you? I don't know. Wrongly smashed. How much money is that costing you? Oh, so it's all an estimate, and they came up with 1.61 billion. Okay, power to them. And Fox's team had to know that this is, a crazy high estimate, and yet they paid 50 cents on the dollar. Normally, you come in there, you offer 20 million, 50 million, 100 million. Now, they came in at 50 cents on the dollar, which means that Dominion was like, I'm sure they offered up 200 million at some point. Dominion said, "Are you kidding me? No." 300 million? No. You're not even close. We're going to they were like, "We need 1.2 billion. Nothing less than that." And they start working towards each other. 780? At a certain point, you say, look, this is what Fox would say. Here's all the ways we can win. First of all, judge's findings. This is overturned he's saying that these were all statements, not opinion. That's his own individual conclusion. But we feel very strongly that on appeal, that you cannot decide as a matter of law. These were statements of fact rather than statements of opinion. If it's statements of opinion, we win and pay you nothing. And we can tie this up in court for years. For years. So you want to go through all that? You want to take 100 million. 100 million is a lot of money. It means no. We'll take that. We'll keep fighting. But it's not just that. It's not just the money, which is astronomical. Because, like I said, normally the settlement percentage on something like a tort is going to be a much smaller percentage. Now, let me just draw this a little bit clearer. Let's assume instead of it being a tort, meaning harming someone else, it was goods sold. They said, we sold you $1.61 billion worth of goods. Then you can understand them saying, we're not taking less than 70 cents on the dollar, 50 cents on the dollar. We can show a jury item by item that we gave you that was worth 1.61 billion. So we know we're going to get a judgment in that amount. When it's just a made up number, you're so confident the jury's going to go along with you. Well, part of what Fox was also dealing with is they had a problem during discovery process. They had a problem. So this might be going through their minds. During the deposition of Rupert Murdoch, this is what Nate the lawyer told me. During the deposition of Rupert Murdoch, that there was a moment where he was being asked about his role within Fox. And he refused to answer the questions. And the judge said, well, since he refused to answer the question, I am going to allow a jury to make a negative inference that you're withholding from the fact that on the basis of you withholding information improperly. And that the jury will be allowed to draw a negative influence. So now I'm sitting here trying to defend about this claim that I'm involved in some sort of I was disregarded, showing reckless disregard for the truth. And the jury's like, yeah, all that evidence that the defense put up there. Well, you're allowed to draw a negative inference about anything they told you because they improperly hid things from us during discovery. It doesn't look good. That doesn't sound good. It sounds shady. Sounds very shady. So maybe they were afraid. Maybe they were afraid they actually were going to get hit with 1.6 billion. Or maybe they thought a jury would go crazy and say 5 billion. Who knows? Maybe they were worried about that. I don't know. Or maybe they were worried about bad PR. Maybe they were worried that more internal memos would come out. Maybe they were worried that there's going to be bad viral moments. Statements that be forced to be made under oath by Tucker, by Maria Bartiromo, by Lou Dobbs or Matt Baird, Rupert Murdoch, which could be very, very damaging to the brand, to Fox News. They said, we can't take the stand. We can't go there. And that's why they offered up so much. But they didn't just offer that. They did far more. Because normally what happens is part of what you're offering, what I'm buying, is silence. Think of Trump with his NDA with what was that? Winter Daniels. He's buying silence, and one of the things that you want is you definitely don't want the number to come out because that's a big number. That's a big number. So you'd much rather have it be said that we settled, and you tell them, I'm giving you $700 million, and part of that is that this case goes away and no one hears about it. But no. They were taking over their knee behind the woodshed and said, no, you're going to acknowledge the findings that the judge made, that your people lied about facts. And they had to give that in. Arguably, for all you know, maybe they would have been willing to pay an extra $100 million rather than have to make that statement. $200 million, $300 million rather than having to make that statement. Dominion took them over the knee. Said, no, you got to make that statement. They lied about us. Or if not, they lied about us, that the judge, we're acknowledging that the judge made these determinations. That's a massive win for Dominion. It's a massive win for them. Here's one more thing, by the way. Getting a judgment, collecting on a judgment, even if it's a big company, it's not easy. It takes a lot of work. It's a lot of time. It's not easy. And maybe Fox has more exposure towards judgment execution than other companies. I don't know. But you kind of know that, hey, it's not so easy to execute a judgment. It's really kind of tough sometimes. Very hard. Very hard. Which is why a settlement is, from a plaintiff's perspective, is so much more beneficial because you know money's coming in. So they know that half of the money is coming in and they get this statement. Fox must have been terrified. They must have been terrified. They must have been terrified of this trial. That's the only possible explanation. Because, I mean, they... What more? What more could they have given up? I guess another $800 million. So that's what we know. That's what we know. Should we go through the statements? I think that's a good idea. Should go through some of these statements. But good logic, Joe. It bothers me that the price is right down to the detail. Can we further? You have a man crush for Victor Newman. I don't even know who Victor Newman is. Okay, who's Victor Newman? Is that the new host? Is that the guy who replaced Bob Barker? Who's Victor Newman? That's got to be the guy who replaced Bob Barker. That's what I got to assume. Just Revere says, debunked by the now known to be comprised government agency called CISA. Right. 3-card Monty. Okay. It's maddening that you're willing to put this burden on news organizations given how much they lie daily. It's maddening. That they have to actually tell the truth? Yeah, apparently. Make sure I didn't see it. Miss anything here. All right, we're good there. We're good there. All right. Check out some of these statements here. So this is what was proven to be and what the judge wrote in his decision. Some interesting stuff here. I can try to read it in actual voice. Yes. La, 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 la. On November 8, 2020, Sunday morning, Futures broadcast. Powell, Yes, there's been a massive and coordinated effort to steal this election from we, the people of the United States, to delegitimize and destroy votes for Donald Trump, to manufacture votes for Joe Biden. They used an algorithm to calculate the votes they would need to flip, and they used computers to flip those votes. By the way, just to be clear, because I know that some people who work for YouTube are kind of slow, I'm quoting, and this is obviously our election. YouTube wants me to tell you that our elections were perfect, and they were. Well, sorry, even I said that wrong. YouTube wants me to tell you that our elections in 2020 elections were perfect, and I am telling you that. And Cindy, I want to ask you about these algorithms. This is terrible. That's a terrible Bartiromo. And Dominion software. All right, so the immediate context, let's focus on that because this is less likely to get me in trouble. Can't really do that. Look at how long this is like one statement. Do you see what I'm saying? This is how long it is. It's like pages. So what the judge is, this is near the end. So this is when the judge is going through all these statements. He says the statement uses precise and readily understood language to assert facts that were capable of being proven true or false, and the context in which the statement is presented creates an inference to a reasonable viewer that it's factual, meaning it's not opinion. The language used during this segment, such as, Sydney, we're talking about Dominion software. I know there were voting irregularities, which I'm not saying that. That's what this quote was. This is the judge quoting Maria Bartiromo. Can you walk us through what is taking place here? Indicates to a reasonable viewer the events in question actually occurred. And Mrs. Bartiromo's questioning her guests in the inquiry of what the evidence is, not whether the evidence exists in the first place. The assertive language used during the segment does not indicate that they were merely opinions. So this is making it a statement of fact, but an affirmative statement of the events which allegedly occurred. As such, the court finds statement issues facts and therefore not protected under the opinion privilege. And then from Lou Dobbs is the next opinion. The judge says, statement used precise and readily understood language to assert facts which are capable of having been proven true or false. And the context in which the statement is presented creates an inference to a reasonable viewer that it is factual. The language used in the segment, and by the way, the states, as you well know now, they have no ability to audit meaningfully. God, this is just begging for me to get a strike. And saying when they use language like, Rudy, we're glad you're on the case and pursuing what is the truth. Yeah, I can't even, I don't even see how I can do this. I can't do it. While a portion of the statement includes language implying Dobbs asserting his own opinion, Rudy, this looks to me like it may be, and I say maybe, and I'm not suggesting it is, the notion is negated by the rest of the sentence, which asserts a fact. Additionally, when viewing the full context of the overall communication being expressed in a segment, a reasonable viewer would understand that Dobbs and Giuliani are asserting facts, not their own opinions. Now, this sort of thing here, that's really sounding a little bit like a question of fact. I'm not going to kid you. This is something they could have appealed and said, you know what, that's a question of fact. That's the way the judge is reading it. But maybe a jury watching it in context would not reach that conclusion, and they would say it's opinion. If it's opinion, we can't be held liable here. But Fox didn't want any piece of the appeal on this. All right, I got to pause here. Much as I'm trying, and I'm really trying to comport with all the regulations, I'm already working on one strike. I can't afford a 2-week vacation that would come from a second strike. I just can't. I can't afford 2 weeks off. I got to work. And even though I keep urging everyone to understand that YouTube wants me to tell you that this was a perfect election, and they want me to tell you that everything was perfect and the vote was counted properly, and I am telling you that somehow confusion. I'm trusting and relying on somebody who speaks English as a sixth language to not get something wrong here and punish me onerously. Because of that, I apologize to my YouTube audience, but I'm going to have to just close this down and stay with Rumble for the rest of the evening. I don't have any choice on that. I can't cover the rest of this. If you have any questions, you should drop them right now on YouTube. I am going to put up for you a link to this stream on Rumble. I can't trust it. This is begging for a headache. I'm not dancing. I'm not dancing with this cancerous devil. It's like I might as well dance with a zombie and hope they don't spit on me. So I'm going to put this in the chat. To make sure to like and subscribe because I did dance here for a while. So, yeah, there's the link there for you. It's pinned to the top of the chat. I'll put it in my description also in case you're watching after the fact. It's possible that you are. So let me put in the description here. So there now it's in the description. And I'm already on Rumble. I'm on Rumble. I know what Rumble is. But, there are issues with Rumble too. Rumble's not perfect. I have the link for Rumble. It's been going on Rumble this whole time. If you're on Rumble, you can just give a thumbs up. So, maybe I can get, I don't know, out of the 300 you watching there, maybe I can get, over, 100 likes. That'd be kind of cool. Show me love. I'll show it back. All right. There you go. If you're hearing the echo. All right. So there you go. I appreciate you all joining me. If you're still with me here on YouTube, I say to you, catch me on Rumble. And so just to YouTube, I'm saying the YouTube folks, I say, Godspeed. I'll be back here, God willing, tomorrow at 10 Eastern.